Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is one of the early sessions of our discussions in Crafting Connections, which is Fashion Revolution India's project that is being done with the support of British Council India. We are looking at the intersection of fashion and craft, and we're looking at how the fashion industry can work with crafts communities across India and the world. We have this partnership going with our friends in the UK, and we're looking at it from the perspective of rebuilding these industries and connections and markets post the lockdown and the pandemic, shutting down the market and putting a stop to trade and creation and production. And now when we look back, we have to see what is there, what do we have to rebuild, what are the areas which used to be ignored earlier, which maybe we can now draw some more light on. So I would like to introduce my first roundtable session, which is a really exciting panel. It's like packed with creative people. We have some fashion revolutionaries coming together to meet some craft revolutionaries. And, in India, fashion is considered both an art and a craft. So I think that there are many things that we can learn from, how to keep an art form alive, how to respect the work that is done by craftspeople. I'd like to start introducing our first panelist. We have Rashmi Sawant. Rashmi is the National Award-winning community tourism entrepreneur. She has founded Culture Aangan. Culture Aangan is in the business of creating sustainable and experiential tourism destinations, which become ways of livelihood and places where villagers can be educated, empowered, especially the local women and the youth, and thus creating a sustainable community where local traditions, local art and culture retained in its most natural form. Indian villages have for centuries been self-sustaining units, conscious of their environment and cultural heritage. However, as we all know today, with urbanization, the culture of the village is being challenged. And Culture Aangan's work believes that through rural tourism, which if developed in a responsible manner, we can educate urban people about the importance and value of the rural community within the broader network of our developing nation. Rashmi is assisted in her work at Culture Aangan by Dipti Godbole. Dipti is a brand strategist and a brand consultant. She's worked with Culture Aangan for the last 2 years, developing socio-economic tourism brand concepts, which contribute to the conservation of arts, crafts, and promoting rural livelihoods. So Culture Aangan came together with Applied Arts Scotland, and this was the British Council brought these two organizations together. Applied Arts Scotland is an organization which is run by members of maker community for makers. Applied Arts Scotland celebrates and supports the creative heart and soul of the making practice and facilitates practical opportunities for creative and business development amongst craftspeople. It's been running for more than 30 years and has undertaken a wide variety of projects. Applied Arts Scotland, we have representatives with us today. We have Netty Sopata and we have Katy Galbraith. Netty and Katy are both integral parts of this project. Netty is a board member of Applied Arts Scotland, and she has also worked with many international collaborations with makers from places like the Indigenous people of Scandinavia, as well as the Indigenous people of Canada. Collaborating with the Sami of Northern Scandinavia, for example, she gained insight into how their society successfully established education programs in schools and took traditional craftsmanship, contemporary design, and effective creative business management and put that at the center of a sustainable strategy for this community. Katy is a mosaic maker, something which is She lives in rural Perthshire. She works primarily with recycled materials and she exhibits in galleries and exhibitions. She sells online via Etsy. And she also teaches mosaic to community groups and schools, and has commissioned works, including 2 at the National Museum of Scotland. Now, on the other side of my panel, I have a few people who are my fashion revolutionaries. We'd like to start by introducing them as well. I have Ekta Rajani. Ekta has been a fashion revolutionary, according to us, before fashion revolution even came to India. Ekta is a stylist. She's been a magazine editor. She's known as somebody who went against the grain within the community and stood for slow fashion and loved clothes last, way before we even thought that the mainstream community would, pick up on these concepts. We have Rina Singh. Rina is a designer who has come from a tradition of studying textiles as well as teaching about textiles. Rina has her own label, Ekta. Prior to that, Rina has worked with major fashion houses in India as well as globally. Rina's beliefs behind fashion are very much wed with beliefs behind craft. Our third panelist is Rafael Pereira. Rafael has been working behind the scenes with Fashion Revolution for a long time. He is our lawyer as well. He is an integral part of our organization. He is an artist who understands the value of artistic intellectual property and has combined his professional training as well as his personal interests into creating a new dialogue for people, creative people, a new dialogue for the creative industry, which we're very excited to bring that into this conversation today. It's something that we've always wanted to do. It's just that it was quite honestly before the lockdown, before the pandemic, there was not as much room to talk about it. But now this is exactly why we are here today, all of us together to talk about it. So those are my introductions. And now I would like to hand it over, please, to the two organizations who are actually doing the work and have Culture Aangan and Applied Art Scotland. Please tell us about the project and tell us about the art form that we're here today to talk about, and start us off on this roundtable, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Aliya, for lovely introductions, and I'm happy to meet everybody. So a little bit about Pinguli. So Pinguli is a village on the Bombay-Goa highway, and it comes from the name Pingla, which in original was called as spies. So these Pingalas, they were the spies for the king when kingship was there, and they would travel from village to village, collecting stories for the king, and then the king would give them the grains and all, and there was patronage, royal patronage, and that's how these Pingalas survived, doing their puppetry work. But when we got our independence, they were relegated to the scheduled tribe, because they are scheduled tribe people, and they were given a piece of land outside the village. So today the national highway runs through the village, but originally it was outskirts of village. The main village of Pingoli is much further different. And these people then settled, but then they had no work because there was no longer royal patronage. So then they slowly the craft died, because most of them went into stone cutting, grass cutting, and migrated, become migrant laborers. 2006, rather 2006, we chanced upon this puppeteers, when we were stuck over there, because we had just started our tourism work, community tourism work, and we were roaming around in the district. Pingoli comes in the coastal region of Maharashtra, which is called Sindhudurg, and we chanced upon this village, and we came upon this puppeteer, and we were astounded to see the work. And he had put up his original puppets and all his leather puppets and chitrakati paintings everywhere. He had rolled it up and put it up in his attic, and there was despair. I mean, there was no future. They said that, oh, nobody wants to know about puppetry. Nobody is interested in puppetry anymore. And when we saw this, we realized that this was a golden opportunity from the tourism perspective, because if we can just get them to get these things revived, then for tourists, it will be a great learning opportunity and interacting, and they will generate livelihoods. So that's how our first step was to set up a small museum there. So there was a cowshed, and we remember creating that cowshed into a puppet museum. A museum is a very broader term, but actually it was small kind of a showcasing gallery where we put up his original puppets and the chitrakati paintings and the shadow puppets, and this became kind of a first avenue of livelihood earnings for this community. And the second step that we did was that they had lost all their skills. When we saw that, I mean, nobody could even draw a simple line, of their Chitrakati paintings. Everybody had lost, and only two master craftsmen were alive, and no younger generation was interested. In fact, in 2006, there was nobody young in that village. Everybody, the youth had all migrated, and it was just the women and these few old people. So we roped in National Institute of Design at that time and got the designers to come and do kind of a skill upgradation and design workshop with these puppeteers. So we assessed their skills and we saw at what level they were and what can be taught to them. And so it was a three-phase workshop that we conducted, where the skills were upgraded, new design techniques were given. We persuaded them not to use poster colors, but to go back to using vegetable dyes, the natural colors. And then how to use that craft and create different products. So maybe a board game can be made from the Pinguli art, or maybe lampshades can be made, or maybe simple greeting cards can be made. So this idea, which they never had, that this art craft can be used and create something else, was first introduced at that time. And then they got the hang. But I have to say that they are very fast learners and they are hungry. They are very hungry people, so they want more and more, because of course there are no opportunities, nobody gave them the opportunities. And from this the journey began. And today the youth, the children have come back. Today the children, small kids, are learning the craft, and it's very heartening to see that it is being taken forward. One of the puppeteers, master craftsmen, whom you all will most maybe meet in future, he's a presidential awardee craftsman. And his son also then went to JJ School of Art with our whatever intervention we had done. They saw the opportunity in it, and they somehow managed to send one of their sons to JJ School of Art just to learn design. And but unfortunately or fortunately, he because I think maybe he came to Bombay and got exposed to so many things. He got involved in so many of the art projects and all which happen in Bombay. But now this pandemic has given him an opportunity to go back to his community and be there with his community, and to support them in this workshop. So this is where we were, and we started getting the tourists. We started getting school kids to come and see the art form, craft form, be with the puppeteers, learn how to make puppets or how to make the drawings, the chitrakati. So Pinguli puppetry is not just puppetry. It has 11 different art forms, but the major ones are the string puppets, the shadow puppets, which are the leather puppets, and the third is the Chitrakati painting, which is like the Madhubani paintings, how they have the storytelling through paintings a similar way. So these are the three major crafts. And so that is where we were. And then we got this opportunity with British Council, where we had to collaborate with an England-based organization in design and arts, and see whether we can take this art form to the next level. And we were very excited, because for us, we saw that at we maybe did with whatever our intervention, we brought the art forms and the artists to level A, but we want them to go to level D, E, F, Z, So we realized that collaborations is a must, and getting more and more people to get to know about Pingoli, getting more experts involved in this would only help them and enable them to reach the level, that potential that the craft has, and not remain it just a rural craft. Most of the times it just gets relegated as a rural craft, or they are just tribal artists or a tribal craftsman. But we didn't want that. We want that it has got huge potential, and it should come into the main fold of art and craft. So this is a wonderful opportunity that we have today with British Council. So we have partnered with Applied Arts Scotland, and we want to see how we can, the Applied Arts Scotland, they will bring in the training modules, they will bring in the design sense, they will bring in the international standards, international, the way of looking at the markets. So this is what we are going to bring this to the community, and hope that the community grasps this, learns this. So having said that, I will hand over now to Netty, if Dipti wants to add something to this. But also lastly, this is a fantastic step. I mean, it is puppets and fashion. And I used to always, that earlier I used to talk about this, like puppet and theater. I see the connection. Puppet and films, I see the connection, you know. So now it is, first step is puppet and fashion. So who knows from here where we will go? You know, sky is the limit. Yeah. So thank you very much, Fashion Revolution. Aliya, thank you, British Council.
Hello, thank you very much for today, and thank you, Rashmi and Dipti, for the great introduction to the project. So, as we were introduced, we're Applied Arts Scotland, and we are, as Rashmi was saying, focusing on developing a bespoke training package for the village, basically, to support all of the skills that ideally empower the artisans within that community to move forward with their art forms. It's obviously evolved over the past year because of the pandemic from our original plans, but in some way that's made us really focus on how to interact with the village digitally as well, rather than trying to do it on a one-to-one basis, which was the original plan. And in many, many ways, that is going to future-proof them as well, to be able to interact and communicate on digital platforms. So we are at the stage now where we are literally finalising the details of the delivery timeline for the training, and that will focus on design skills, but also then moving forward to marketing on digital platforms too. It is, from our perspective, very much about empowering artisans to focus on how to develop their art forms and design, and then be able to communicate them. So it's not about us as an international organisation stepping in and going, right, well, if you do this, this and this will work. It's about introducing them to ideas and concepts through case studies, which make them think through and take responsibility for their own work. And therefore, in doing so, through tried and tested work that we've done through other Crafting Futures projects, so in Mexico and Afghanistan and Thailand, it's about then developing something sustainable from a design perspective for them. So it's a very, very rough introduction because we've not finalised everything in detail, but that's our viewpoint, and that's where we come through it. I'm going to hand over to Katy now for her to kind of input too.
Welcome, everyone. Part of the original application also touched on elements of tourism, and our original scoping, which was planned for last March, was going to look at how the tourism sort of integrated. I actually have a background in tourism and marketing before I really took on Mosaic, so this is where a lot of my input could come from. But we not being able to see any tourism in action meant we can't really comment on that at this stage. But throughout our marketing process, we are also bearing in mind, how do you get visitors to the area? How do you, not just selling on online platforms, but part of our training brief will consider the other elements within that, just how we can make it a kind of viable tourism offering as well, to complement the work of Culture Aangan. But beyond that, I think the only other part that's possibly relevant is challenges of training the diverse skill set that we've got. So we do actually have masters on the ground, but we also have people who've not really done any at all. So, and different levels of literacy, different levels of ability. So that's certainly from our end is quite a challenge, is how to kind of make that training flow right through the community, not just be stuck at the top level of the masters. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. So.
Great, thank you so much for the overview. So I'm going to move on now to our fashion industry representatives. I was wondering if I would start with Rina. If you want to just give us your feedback and point of view. We had shared some of the videos and photographs and pieces from the art forms with you earlier, and just love to know what your thoughts are. So,
to be honest, I think it is a great and very unique craft form. Absolutely unique, because I don't think this is done anywhere else in the world. There are shadow puppets, if I'm not wrong, also that are made in Indonesia. But the process of making this is very different. The motif language, the color, the story behind it. How, when I was going through it, all the documentaries that you had sent about making it and the context of it when it came to form. And now later on, so many years later, when we're actually questioning, is it really relevant? And then to integrate it with fashion somehow, to see that if the storytelling from the craft can be integrated with storytelling in fashion, and make the craft form sustain on its own merit in the future. Now, this is the question that I see that I could perhaps, sitting on this chair, be answering and getting involved with the people who are so seriously involved with the art form. Like, I'm only coming from the outside and looking at it and probably contributing in terms of what I can put together in terms of my thought process. I feel, so far as fashion is really honest, leather as a resource now going forward in terms of sustainability is actually really questionable. The whole idea of making any kind of a product or commodity by using leather, because the process itself is so, of course, it's violent and it's very brutal. But besides that, it's not even very environment friendly, of course, as we know. So now, can the whole craft, to make it more relevant in today's time, can we make it more contextual in terms of the kind of world we live in? Why I'm saying this is because I use a lot of block printing in my collections. And when I started as a student, when I learned about block printing, and later on I researched a lot about block printing, studying all different kind of, so the craft form, so block printing is a craft, but how it is, there are different forms of it. Like, for example, in Bagru, we use a typical kind of a textile technique to use the block printing. Then there's Sangane, then there is Ajrak. There is so many different kind of variations of what one can do with, one kind of a textile technique. Now, that's the same question when I will ask, when I would look at this craft form and say that, are there any other formats in which it could be upgraded? Can a design intervention help? Is storytelling going to be enough? So, for example, maybe a designer can intervene and take the craft forward in terms of maybe design presentations, making it a part of probably building accessories through it for shows or whatever it is. But is that sustainable? Is that relevant? Can the craft go forward on its own merit based on that intervention? Now, these are the questions that would come very, that I could identify when I looked at it, and I looked at my involvement, even if it is just a group discussion. Now, this came to me immediately, like how relevant it is. What is the context of it? Like the context of Bagru at the time when it was being printed with the same kind of a textile technique in a certain environment was so different from the context of Ajrak, or from the context of Sanganer, or from the context of, all different places. So the shadow puppeteers, as you said, that it was the royalties, it was the king's families that kind of patronized them. Storytelling, we didn't have cinemas, leave alone Netflix and the other channels for the children to be entertained and all that. So there was a great value in it. And of course, it could be patronized and it could be taken forward. In today's age and time, are we just going to put them in a frame and a box and say, we cherish and enjoy you as a memory of history? Or are we going to infuse it with relevance and contextual changes that it so requires to survive on merit? Like, a lot of other people who might get really closely involved with the craft would feel that, that corrupts the craft. But I feel to make it relevant, perhaps that is what is needed. So maybe to think about, is leather the only channel in which the craft can be practiced? Or can we try in today's time, could there be different interventions from different designers, perhaps fashion also? And what would be their take on it? And how would they carry it forward? Perhaps in accessories, or, making it in canvases instead of using leather as a canvas, maybe. Or using the form of storytelling and being able to, draw those forms by hand on on say on puppets and all that. I don't know, probably create like a bigger canvas, and so many things can come out. But yes, I think what has to be questioned right now is how sustainable it is going to be on merit if we are not really talking context and relevance of the craft in today's time. That is something that I would perhaps question about.
Okay, great, super. Ekta, how about your thoughts?
I think from a styling and a communication point of view, I mean, Rina's covered, like, you know, she's laid the foundation for how it needs to be contextualized and made relevant into 2020 and going ahead. I think the advantage right now is that this year has been almost like a boom for anything handicraft and anything local. So you suddenly have a new audience. People are looking perhaps to, I mean, an older audience that may have only looked at, you know, the high street or, you know, urban design, and, you know, suddenly are starting to look for anything that could be partially or fully handicrafted, because suddenly there's been such a loud conversation about it this year in India, for sure. In terms of its context in fashion, I literally feel like there is no boundary, and its adaptation lies in the hands of the people who engage with these craftspeople. I think a bridge definitely needs to be created, whether that comes in the form of a, you know, dedicated person working on the ground, you know, and constantly bringing people from the fashion fraternity into this village. It could be somebody working with textiles. It could be somebody who is a stylist. I know that runway presentations are not taking place at this point in time, but video presentations have taken precedence. There is so much of a multidisciplinary approach to presenting fashion, and whether this is used as a character in that space, or turns into something that people can take home. Today, if we understand the adaptive levels of the skills of this community, could this be turned into handbags? Could it be, could we find a version of it to make tinier, and can it turn into a pendant? Can I see someone floating it on the bottom of a shoe heel? The thing is, I feel the limitation is in the head of the collaboration. The expansion is in the space of the collaboration. So I think that if we attempt to have 20 dialogues, there is bound to be at least 2 to 3 that find a way to work because of the adaptability. And as Rina also mentioned, and I've seen some other organizations be able to do this, and I have some friends who've worked in the space of design intervention. So I lean into their experiences and share this point, where I had a friend who worked in 2 or 3 villages for a period of 4 to 5 months. She herself is an industrial designer from RISD. And what came out of, and she was doing this for Asian Heritage Foundation that runs similar programs of design intervention in different villages. And, you know, something that was being used very locally to perhaps make a pure item of utility, when they did their final display in Bombay, because of, you know, her engagement with the community for about 4 months, we found earrings, we found handbags, we found, I mean, of course, they even had people from the architectural space go there, but that comes under a different discipline. But because she brought in fashion's perspective to that craft, we saw at least 3 new products emerge from her interaction with 2 villages over a period of 4 to 6 months. And I can't quite comment on what the sales or the cycle of independence from that project was, but something that was traditional did become more urban friendly with a time span of about 6 months. And when I heard about that, I didn't think that that was a lot of time per se to try exploring a new product. It's very doable, and it found an urban audience quite soon. But of course, there was an intervention. So I think that the more we can somehow create interest and conversation about the craft forms on these platforms such as this, where this strikes someone's fancy, and taking that meeting and engaging with them and inviting them into the village and seeing if scale can be changed, can something be standardized, like Rina said, can materials be made more relevant to 2020, because audiences today are being taught, consumers are being taught to question materials. So while the craft might be amazing, the material may be out of sync, from 2000 years ago into the current. So, if we can, sort of format this and create like even a 6-month engagement with at least 6 to 8 professionals that visit it and see what they can do, I feel like you'd find a couple of products, and even that interaction and that exposure will give the community such a sense of imagination that what I made as a puppet is now a bag. And if you've triggered their imagination, then it doesn't stop at that. They understand that it doesn't stop at that. So, I mean, I think so much is possible, but of course it requires the hard work on the ground.
Thank you. Now over to Rafael. Rafael, I would love to hear your thoughts on everything that we've heard so far. As we can also take this point forward, which is talking about how when you get the inspiration from a place, then what is that relationship between you making something and what you have to give back as a creator, as being inspired like by a muse, but a muse that's looking for a payment. So.
Well, thank you for having me, Aliya. Thank you to Fashion Revolution, British Council, and all the organizations that were part of putting this together. Let me start by saying something that may sound controversial, but I'll go out and explain it. From a utilitarian perspective, I'd like to put this conversation into 2 contexts. One is that of art, which chases expression, and the second, which is that of craft, which chases perfection. Debatable, but essentially, I'll deal with the art aspect. And as Rashmi stated, now you're at a stage where this community has kind of perfected their skills or a certain style of expression in certain mediums. It's really important to build strength in the community while they're being educated, as well as a primary knowledge and understanding, or a certain written or unwritten code within that community of what their rights are, how they're creating and how they're going to protect those rights. When you look at creative communities which are rural or neglected, where the rate of literacy is quite low, or the resources that they have are quite limited, you often tend to see that in sum and substance, you're judged by your weakest link. That's normally where you lose out as a community. And essentially, if the artists come together and put a code in place, and everyone decides to abide by that code in terms of how their art can be licensed, at what rate it can be licensed, etc., It works really well when, as a collective, they come together and everyone follows the same set of principles and tariffs, let's say. However, even one or a few of those artisans and artists stop abiding by that code, you find that market forces are able to take advantage of that. A very good example here is that of, I mean, there are a couple beginning with the Bengal Patachitra, the Gazipur wall hanging, Surat Zari craft. But I think a good example for this call is the Bengal Patachitra. What they've been able to achieve is the status of a geographical indication, and how they're able to protect their craft within the community and against other communities that would like to profit out of their craft, which is very important, because as soon as you see I mean, you're investing time and effort into training these artists of the Pingoli region. I think the words Pingoli puppets, it's an alliteration and has a good ring to it. You can really exploit on that name, capturing a geographical indication that protects the art just from that particular village or that particular region, to the exclusion of any other community that tries to produce a similar product and sell it under the name of Pinguli, the village. For designers looking to work with art of that era, yes, you can go out and that would be considered public domain. However, it's a thorough check needs to be done when you're working with that art. It's very easy to, especially when we're dealing with traditional knowledge, expression and culture, it's very easy to confuse one artist's work, which is recent and well within copyright, with another artist's work, which is in the public domain. So whenever you're working with sensitive subject matter, like traditional cultural expression, it's always best to do a check. And the second thing would be to figure out from the get-go a model of how you're going to work with that artist. Because the work that you as a designer or anyone that uses the artwork will be producing is going to be a derivative or an adaptive work that requires a license. Or you can choose to commission a certain design for either a line of items, a certain display, or you could also work on a royalty model if you'd rather not make such an upfront investment. So that is something that I believe you should keep in mind. One example before I conclude is you should look at HIPAM's India, which is the Heritage Sensitive Intellectual Property and Marketing Strategies organization. They're a UK funded organization, coincidentally. And they've also been supported by the UK government's Global Challenges Research Fund. And what they've done is, the example that I gave of the Bengal Patachitra, they created an art code with that community and basically listed down what the community would be willing to do and how they would like to engage with all stakeholders and the terms of engagement with all stakeholders. So artists within the community, artists from outside the community, media, how they should be attributed, as well as others who are looking to create something similar. So those are some examples which I think this is a great point in time for you to pay heed to. And overall, I think it's best to start educating on both sides, the buyer side as well as the seller side, on how they can respect, acknowledge rights, and how they can protect their rights on the other side.
Fantastic. Thank you for that information, Rafael. I think that's it's something new to quite a few of us. So just want to come back to our two organizations, Culture Aangan, Applied Arts Scotland. Wondering if you had any specific questions, any thoughts, anything that's been said that you want to add on to, or you want to, take us in a different direction.
At the moment in Britain, there's a lot of artists and artisans that are taking their imagery and using it on platforms like Printify and these big global companies where you put your, you upload your image and it goes off and it gets made into whatever, which is an area that I think you lose control of very quickly. Now, the community that the Pinguli community on their original questionnaires that we sent out said, we want to make cups, plates, mugs, coasters, whatever. And I have to say they all said exactly the same thing. So there's a danger of where do you limit the artisan's ability to kind of make their own income that way, but what am I trying to say? But actually, we're trying to say, well, no, you've got to keep your core craftsmanship and your core heritage, and not lose sight of the identity that they have. But I think my question out to the panel is, how do they see it? Is this a big thing in India as well? These uploading dropship type companies, and how does that affect the industry? How does that affect the fashion industry as well?
So I think Katy's talking about, sort of like a site where you can, you just upload your own drawing or any drawing or illustration, and then you can print like 100 mugs or 100 coasters. Almost like in India, we have like a merchandising sort of model, which sort of does it. I don't know if craftspeople are doing it. We'll have to check. I mean, I'm sure there are people who've been, we've had this discussion when we've discussed, like for instance, usage of Warli designs on something, or usage of Madhubani but printed out as opposed to hand work. So that kind of reproduction of something that's originated as a hand form, that is a discussion that I know people are having. But also the biggest debate is, hey, whatever sells, that's what it all boils down to, right? If it's selling, don't stop me from selling it. So you can't argue with that.
Rather our approach in our company culture, Aangan, is that they have to be given their due, because they are priceless. Like, you will not find across India a Pinguli artist, or you will not find across India a Venkatgiri weaver, or they are priceless. So but what I am also seeing as I travel in the interiors of this country is that there is despair. Like, one of our Rajasthan, we have a glass maker. He makes exquisite glass work. He's made the largest chandelier for the state guest house of Rajasthan. I think it's the country's biggest chandelier that he's created. But today, in this pandemic time, last few weeks back, he called me. He's begging. So he's literally becoming a beggar, and I am thinking that somebody where Pratibha Patil, when she was the president, she had visited and, seen his work and appreciated, and he's got the orders and all. But today he's going to the streets. So then what do we do? And he's priceless. I know, because if you see his work, it's amazing. The glass work, beautiful, But what do we, how do we, what do we do? Yeah.
So, if I may, Rashmi, based on what Rina said and what you said, I think with the current generation of artists that you've got, one thing that you have to be careful from the get-go is that they continue to be artists, that is, to express themselves and their surroundings, and not just, I don't mean to say it in a demeaning way, but not to copy the work of the previous generation and keep reproducing the work on the same mediums. So that's number one. But I'll give you an example, and maybe to what Netty also said, and this could possibly help, which is you have the younger generation, which is my generation. I believe I am the youngest on the call. But essentially, you you can look at the example of stand-up comedians, and comedians have evolved from, let me say, a place of nobility, which is jesters in the court, in a king's court, and now you have stand-up comedians doing Netflix specials and Amazon specials. A stand-up comedian kind of creates a cycle that really works for a set of material. That is a few jokes that start from being 5-minute open mic sets, going up to an hour that can be done on stage, preceded by other acts. And a stand-up comedian will only go out and record that material once he or she feels that they have commercially juiced out their material through their entire touring and festival circuit, right? And only then will they go out and take that material and take it to the larger masses with a Netflix and Amazon special. So what I'm getting at is you really have to define a strategy. Maybe it could be seasonal, the way designers do it, and with collections. But you really need to define a strategy of what work are you going to use for what mediums, and what when are you going to release that, and how can you really understand the marketability of certain works. So link certain work to certain mediums and certain markets. That's how import-export businesses also work. That's the reasoning and the rationale behind why we don't get, or maybe this season we got the best of mangoes in India, but usually the best of mangoes are sent out, right? So you understand your markets, the marketability, the purchasing power, and you need to create certain cycles and certain work products that are linked to certain mediums. That lessens the chances of reiterations or infringement, copies, because you also have to remember you need to be one step ahead of not just your competitors, but infringers today, and planning good enough cycles, small batches that sell to your consumers through a middleman or directly for a particular season. They get exhausted, and then you have a next batch. So your consumers know that there was a limited quantity and anyone else is selling a fake or a copy. So that would be my suggestion there.
Great, thank you. Dipti.
I just want to say a short thing because I know we are all are running out of time. Rina and Ekta, I really value your inputs, because one of the primary things on our agenda was to how do we push the envelope on Pinguli as an art. And the most challenging part of what we are also facing is that what is really authentic Pinguli, and can we keep it Pinguli? You know, sometimes you can un-Pinguli things. When you look at Pinguli, like how you have a Warli art, when you look at Warli, it gives you a sense, okay, even if I give you a small piece, you'll identify it as Warli. We really want to keep the authenticity. And right now we are at a tipping point where we can capture all this, give all the protection, GI, everything, but we also have the onus to train the artists to retain the authenticity in that form, because it's very, very important to Pinguli to be like Pinguli. Because just to give you an example, we might get requests, and sometimes we do get requests where you can do Pinguli in a different form and try to build a restaurant around it. It's not that. That's not Pinguli. So it's on to us how we excite, inspire the artists to do something like that. It's very easy for us to say, okay, you know, you take this money and get on and do me a wall print, which is Pinguli, but it is not Pinguli, you know. But so we are actually on that tipping point, and we have to be extremely careful. So I think even the points that Rafael is making, and we are all planning and thinking about how to get the GI done, how to protect the artist, how to actually help them understand what is the art form and how to retain it. I think Netty and Katy, we're really looking forward for their upping their craftsmanship, because there are only 2 families who are doing it perfectly. The rest of the village are not actually there at that benchmark. So we're all waiting to up their standards. So we're really looking forward for this. And whatever you have said is like music, because it looks like the last stage that we wanted to hit on innovation. There's definitely huge scope, and we will definitely need all your inputs of Fashion Revolution and British Council to actually take us to that level, because we want to go there. We want to do something very different with these guys and see their art taking shape in its all genuinity. So we can be so proud. Like today, Wadli is there. We want to take Pinguli there, you know. That's all I wanted to say, but it's really very reassuring and very nice to hear all you guys talking so much. And that's really fitting the picture about innovation, because that was one area that we were all wondering how to take it on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I think we are now out of time, so I will wrap up this session. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone. I think we really, you know, we covered the quite a bit in terms of just by bringing together two completely unrelated, seemingly unrelated groups of people. I think we've actually really we've really covered the entire crux of what this program is going to be looking at as well, which is contextualizing craft, looking at materials, you know, looking at communication, looking at, you know, how are the stories being told, whether, you know, the new technologies, cross-cultural collaborations, the entire purpose of this program. I think everybody has just summed it up and spelled it out so beautifully for us in this roundtable. So thank you so much for doing that. And we will be back every month with some new sessions. So please keep an eye out for Crafting Connections online, digitally, happening everywhere for the next couple of months. Thank you so much, British Council. Thank you so much to my team, Fashion Revolution India team. Thank you so much to our guests. Thank you so much for the two organizations who have shared this with us and allowed us to play a little bit with their project. And we really look forward to, you know, continuing to have this exchange with you guys and really taking it somewhere where we can all smile and be like, hey, remember it all started on that one little roundtable session. So thank you so much. See you guys soon. Thank you.